So if we're moving on, we're going to introduce the respiratory system. So if we break down our body into all those different systems, we've covered the skeletal system, we've covered the muscular system, we've covered the circulatory system, and now we're going to move on to the respiratory system. And they all work in together to supply our body with what it needs to work at a normal rate for survival and everything that we need to do in life. So if we think about the respiratory system, it works hand in hand with the circulatory system because our lungs are the primary function for the respiratory system, pumping blood into our heart to get it oxygenated. Now our lungs do a lot more than what just pumping oxygen. What it does, it siphons through CO2, flushes out different chemicals to allow our body to then not get toxified and poisoned. The lungs are located in the thorax and it's protected by the rib cage. So if we look at the anatomy of our human body, we've got our heart, which we've said is to the right of our left nipple in a fist shape. If we go within that, our lungs, we have a left lung and a right lung, and that sits underneath our rib cage. So they are in the midline of our body, and what is between them is our digestive tract. So within that digestive tract is our esophagus, our pharynx and larynx, and that leads up to our oral cavity. When we breathe oxygen in and oxygen out, we're inhaling and exhaling. So when we breathe in normal air, that air is made up of 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 0.04% carbon dioxide. So if we think about the rates of that and how much oxygen we're getting, 21% out of that breath is oxygen. It's not a lot, so that's why we breathe so much to get that oxygen in. Now, even if we look at that carbon dioxide at 0.04% of that breath, it's not a lot as well, but the toxicity of it is quite high, so our body is spending a lot of time actually siphoning and sieving through that to then remove it when we exhale. When we exhale, we're going to be removing 78% of that nitrogen, so all of it is going to be then breathed out. 16% of oxygen is then going to be exhaled, so we've used 5% to supply our body with oxygen, and then we don't need the rest of it. And then we remove 4% carbon dioxide. So if you think about inhaling 0.04% carbon dioxide and then exhaling almost 100% more, we need to think about how that's happened. What's happened to your body, or what's happened to the CO2 to cause a reaction to allow more carbon dioxide to be exhaled from the body. I'm going to go through that in a minute. Okay, so looking at how we breathe air in, so inhaling air and exhaling air, it's an involuntary muscle called the diaphragm. So the diaphragm sits just underneath the rib cage, and what it does, it contracts and extends to allow your lungs to inflate and then get smaller when air gets breathed out. Looking at the other muscles that we use within our respiratory system, we look at the internal and external obliques and the intercostal muscles within our rib cage. So our rib cage is individual single bones, almost short bones, and they're connected together with intercostal muscles. So we've got the intercostal muscles, which is allowing the expansion, and then the diaphragm is allowing the squeezing to pump that air out. So looking at the passage of air from the environment into our bodies, we take that air and it goes through our oral cavity or our nose. Once it's gone through that entrance point, it goes down the air passageway, which is your pharynx, larynx, all the way into your lungs. Once it's in your lungs, it's going to meet the bronchioles and the alveoli. Through that stage, it's going to go through gaseous exchange, separating those sections out from nitrogen, oxygen and carbon dioxide. That carbon dioxide is going to go through pulmonary diffusion. After it's done that pulmonary diffusion, it's then going to exit the body through what's called pulmonary capillaries and then the pulmonary vein. That blood is going to come from the heart to the lungs, collect that oxygen that we've come through the passageway, and then back into the heart through the right atrium, and then it's going to get pumped back out the body through the right ventricle. Breaking that passage of air through the body down and looking closer at gaseous exchange and what it is. So gaseous exchange is the diffusion. So pulmonary diffusion, where it's the exchange of gases within the lungs. Those gases that we talk about is oxygen and carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide, what we want to leave the body, and then the oxygen we want to enter the blood and then get transported to the working muscles and the organs where it's going to be used as an energy source for activity. This diffusion or gaseous exchange occurs within the capillaries that surround the alveoli in the lungs. So what alveoli are, if we look at an image of the lungs, are little specks within the lungs, and there's loads of them, which allows this gaseous exchange when the oxygenated blood, oxygen and carbon dioxide enter them. So looking at gaseous exchange and the anatomy of what is needed for that to happen, the alveoli within the lungs and the capillaries. The alveoli look like a bundle of grapes, and they're covered by a mesh. Now that mesh is what the capillaries are going to then separate and cause that diffusion of gases, the separation of oxygen and CO2.